Wimpy white boy syndrome.
Wimpy white boy syndrome.
We live in a society that has had to coddle the unfavorability based upon by nature.
You look like you're developing wimpy white boy syndrome. That's their way of saying we think you're going to die. It's divine. And if you know what you're looking at, it's like watching a movie.
Well, wasn't that something special? Listen, before you assume that this is some new made-up insult from TikTok, I'm here to tell you that it's not. Wimpy white boy syndrome is a phrase that's used inside neonatal intensive care units to describe white baby boys who, especially when they're premature, have a harder time than other babies with some medical problems. Now, the best that I could find, it traces back to a November 2003, a discussion online among NICU nurses titled, "You know you're a NICU nurse when," and one of the items that somebody had written was, "You have affectionately called a patient Cletus the fetus, wimpy white boy, troll, or funny-looking kid." That's what nurses were writing online 23 years ago. So this is not a formal diagnosis. There's no disease in the medical textbooks or anywhere else called wimpy white boy syndrome. But the underlying male disadvantage in premature babies is very real, particularly when it does come to respiratory problems. And there is research, which we'll get into in just a moment, showing that white male infants have historically had higher risk for respiratory distress syndrome in some populations as well. But what caught my attention was not the very well-supported evidence for all of that. I mean, somebody has to have the lowest outcomes, right? In this instance, it's infant white baby boys. But what got me was what people do with baby and premature boys' vulnerability after giving it a cute little insulting name. So let me give you some research and data on the condition, and just wait until you hear about what some of these women have to say about it. So let's get the medical part out of the way first, because I don't want anybody watching to confuse the criticism of the phrase wimpy white boys with denial that there is any medical evidence. Of course, I am not a doctor. I'm not a health practitioner. This is a research evidence and data that I found. A 2021 systematic review and meta-analysis looked at 41 studies that involved more than 625 premature infants. I'll put an image up here for you to have a look. And of course, as always, links down below for you. Now, in this analysis, boys had higher risk for respiratory distress, serious brain bleeding, bronchopulmonary dysplasia, and other conditions, even mortality. Now, the increased risks weren't huge in every category, but the pattern was broad and consistent enough that researchers describe a real male disadvantage of prematurity at birth. And similarly, this study up on the screen here followed 286,454 babies born between weeks 34 and 42. After adjusting for other factors, male babies had 68% higher odds of respiratory distress syndrome than females. Now, white race was also independently associated with higher risk compared to Asian babies, black babies, and Hispanic ones, all in that same cohort. At 34 weeks, 13% of white male babies developed respiratory distress compared with 4.3% of Hispanic female babies. And that's a very large gap. There are more studies and data that I found, but I'll simply link them to you below in my resources. But you get the point. It is a real thing. So let me just remind you what the medical industry for decades, even if unofficially, has called this: wimpy white boy syndrome. But my interpretation? The babies aren't simply weak, they're sick or unhealthy. Now let's have a look at some of the responses to the TikTok videos that sent me down this rabbit hole. By the way, all of these comments come from a single video. It was that first younger woman that I showed in the clips. Here's one right here. My GMA was a nurse for 40 years dealing with premature babies, and she said the wimpy white boy thing, saying this was their little inside joke. Their little inside joke about premature infants. Now, I keep coming back to that because describing the child as wimpy, maybe he's struggling to breathe, maybe he's having a difficult time eating or regulating his body temperature, any host of dozens of different challenges. But somewhere along the line, an actual biological disadvantage got turned into a joke for women, nurses of all people. The very women that are providing medical care for your premature or newborn son. Here's another comment, again from that same video. My nurse called it lazy white boy syndrome when mine was born. Lazy, the nurse said. Now, we don't know if it was a male nurse or a female nurse who said that, but give me your guess in the comments. A newborn baby is now lazy because his body didn't or isn't developing as quickly as another baby's body. Let's apply that same logic elsewhere in medicine. If one demographic group has a higher rate of disease, heart disease, for example, do we attach a character insult to those patients? Hell, it's even offensive to tell a woman that she's being obnoxious when she's having her period. We can't even get away with that. Here's another comment. Diary of a Wimpy White Preemie. The prequel movie coming to a theater near you. Again, we're talking about premature babies here. And here's a couple that take it entirely out of the neonatal ICU. My dad is a wimpy white boy at 65 years old. Oh, snap. My husband has this. But he's Korean and 43. So now it's not just about neonatal respiratory distress. It's about grown men, husbands, and fathers. Guys, do not ever believe that women care about you, whether it's your wife, your daughter, your sister, or any other. The first chance they get to call you a wimpy baby in front of a bunch of other women, they will. Let's move on here a little bit. Now we get to the even more revealing comments. Women, and I'm speaking mainly about black women here because that's who made the TikTok videos and these comments.
And this is the reason why we live in the system that we currently live in, where you literally have old, elderly white men that are making the decisions for a whole entire, world, a whole entire country, just to be able to protect their ego, just to put all of these like handicaps in place.
You are most likely to die, so you want to take everybody with you.
They hear that a white male baby can have a documented disadvantage in certain neonatal outcomes. And instead of having 1 ounce of sympathy for those little babies, they immediately search for a way to be a victim. Check out this comment. Seems most likely to me that it's about systemic racism and care providers putting more resources into white versus black girls. Here's another one. I don't like this. I feel like they're going to use that to hurt little black infants. And a third one, they're saying that white boys get more care automatically. That's who they want to provide more care for. And notice what happened. We went from a measurable sex difference in neonatal health to a claim of medical staff deliberately giving white boys more care because of racism. But we actually have recent data to show otherwise. This brand new study published in 2026, the study assessed 1,674 moderate to late preterm infants with respiratory distress syndrome, and they found, get this, no significant racial or ethnic differences during the birth hospitalization in respiratory support, mechanical oxygen administration, length of stay, or discharge status. Now back to the comments. Here's another one. That means that white people have been artificially suppressing other races for hundreds of years to maintain a false minority. What the actual hell is that? Here's another one. Now imagine if black people got proper and respectful medical care all around. What kind of 180 is this? And this is what I mean by refusing to let a male health problem simply be a male health problem. We're discussing newborn boys with documented biological health issues, emergencies. And within a few comments, we arrived at hundreds of years of racial suppression and a theory about white dominance. The newborn white boy that's fighting for his life disappeared entirely from all of those ignorant, entitled, self-victimizing women. Premature baby boys' medical vulnerability is not something worth caring for them to care about at all. It's all about their made-up stories that allows them to take no responsibility for their own life outcomes. What utter bullshit. So this actually brings me to the real question that I wanted to pose today. If white baby boys are supposedly so wimpy, what the hell is going on with all of those white women producing these wimpy boys? Listen, if we're going to treat a biological difference as a weakness or a character flaw, why stop with the newborn baby? Who conceived it? Who carried that baby? Where did those terrible, weak little lungs come from? Why are white women's babies such weak little jerks? You know what? Maybe we need a term for some type of syndrome for the mothers, like makes scrawny babies syndrome, or unhealthy white woman who doesn't care for her fetus syndrome. That sounds ugly, right? Good, because that's the point. Now, listen, I started looking at this because the phrase almost sounded too ridiculous to be real. I can't believe that I've never heard of it up to this point. But it turns out it is real, and it's often very serious. But the more I looked into it, the less interested I was in arguing about whether boys have poorer health outcomes. Turns out it's very well documented, and it's true. They do in a number of areas, and that should make us more concerned about them. And I think that tells us something much larger about how male vulnerability is processed culturally. Too often, sickness in the male body is treated as a weakness of character. I've talked a little bit about men's health outcomes and situations in the past. If this video does really well and you want me to do more investigation into health differences between men and women, let me know, because I will. I can go into this a lot deeper. So give us your stories in the comments. Be extremely wary of female nurses who care for your sons, and I'll be back as soon as I can.